Welcome to the Maternal Wealth Podcast, your space for all things maternal health, pregnancy, birth, and beyond. I am Stephanie Terrio, a labor and delivery nurse and a mother to 3 beautiful boys. Each week, we dive into inspiring stories and expert insights to remind us of your power in giving birth and motherhood. We're here to explore the joys, the challenges, and the complexities of maternal health. Because every mother's journey is unique and every story deserves to be told. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider for medical guidance tailored to your specific needs. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Maternal Wealth Podcast. Today, we welcome Holly Johnson. She is a private practice IBCLC, which is an international board-certified lactation consultant. She's passionate about improving access to lactation care. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in maternal and child health and human lactation. Currently, she's pursuing a master's degree in public health with a concentration in maternal child health. This will help her further enhance her ability to assist women in need of lactation support. I'm excited for our listeners to hear more about the impact that Holly is making in the maternal field of health. With her experience working in rural and military communities, she designed and built a mobile lactation clinic called Lady Leche. Holly is a mother and a military spouse with an agricultural background, and she's raising her 3 children on a small farm in central Missouri. Welcome, Holly.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and chat with us.
It's my pleasure.
First, let's start off with learning a little bit more about yourself and how you came into the lactation career.
Well, it's actually kind of funny, but I think very similar to a lot of people in the lactation field. Most of us get into this field, I think, because of our own personal experience with feeding our own child. But mine actually starts from my childhood. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and my parents raised cattle and also sheep for a good chunk of my childhood. And although I actually never really saw anyone breastfeeding, like a human feeding their baby, it was instilled in me that you feed your baby with your body simply by seeing cattle and sheep feed their babies. And seeing my father work very hard to keep baby calves and lambs on their mom or on another mom versus pulling them off and bottle feeding. Because as a child, you're like, oh, please, can we bottle feed them? And my father would be out there for hours trying to get them onto a different cow or get them grafted onto another animal to make sure they received milk from their same species. And it was kind of an interesting way that really got me thinking, we should be doing this with our own babies. I went on with life. I had my first baby in Fairbanks, Alaska as a young military spouse. And breastfeeding was very, very challenging. And although there wasn't much lactation support at the time, I just kind of navigated it myself and the help of some labor and delivery nurses and great midwives. And I didn't really have much as far as human feeding to go off of, but I kept relating to my agriculture background and how important it was to feed your baby with your body. So I overcame those challenges. I became pretty close with a lot of people in the L&D unit and the peds department at that small Army hospital. And I just naturally kind of started holding mom groups and helping others just peer-to-peer support feed their babies. And that's when I took a turn in my education. At the time, I was attending the University of Alaska Fairbanks, working in social work. And I was like, I don't really think this is what I want to do. And I also was before that working in education. And I was like, I love children and I love helping people, but this just isn't what I really feel passionate about. So after having my first child, having these lived experiences, that's when I switched gears and started pursuing a degree in maternal child health and human lactation. And I did that while raising my children and during deployments and all that fun stuff, and pursued an IBCLC. That's how I got here today.
I love to hear women talk about continuing their education, finding a passion, and going for it, even when you have the small kids. Like you said, your husband was on deployment. We find a way to get it done, and that's what a woman is. Could you tell us a little bit more about what is an IBCLC and the path to get there?
An IBCLC is an international board certified lactation consultant. I have a degree in human lactation and maternal child health. I completed a 500-hour hands-on mentorship under IBCLCs in the state of Washington. To complete this, I actually moved my children from the state of Colorado, where we were currently stationed, to the state of Washington, and would commute an hour and a half each way to a small rural hospital in Pullman, Washington, where I'm extremely grateful they took me on as their little mentee. And that was during a deployment as well. So that was how I was able to complete my hours. And then I sat for the exam, and then you recertify every 5 years. There are 3 pathways, so not everyone has to take the path that I took to become an IBCLC. So if anyone's interested in that route, then I would definitely look up the IBCLE website and look at the 3 pathways available to those to obtain that credential.
I've heard the exam is pretty intense. Is that correct?
I think yes and no. One thing that I learned was the exam is its own kind of breed, right? It has its own focus, and it was not completely different, but it was kind of fascinating to realize what I learned from my studies and how that applied to the exam. And then what I learned in my hand-on experience in my mentorship that applied to the exam. And then it was kind of like you walked out of that exam going like, okay, I can like take the world. And then realizing, wow, there is so much more to learn. And really those in the lactation field are just lifelong learners. You're never going to walk away and have a moment where you're like, I know it all. That's just not going to happen in this field. So the exam is pretty intense. My exam was originally pushed back due to COVID. So they only offer it twice a year. And so mine was pushed back. And then I had to take it at home. And it was a very stressful situation because you had to run an Ethernet cord from downstairs up to your room. You had to like walk these people over a camera through your room. They watched you while you took the exam. Of course, I had 2 young children and I was pregnant and my husband was deployed. So my mother had to fly in from across the country, and they couldn't be in the home during the time of the exam, which is a few hours long. So my mom took my young children to a hotel with a swimming pool because, of course, it was cold in the winter in Colorado. And it was just one of those things that there was a lot more going on that made it probably more stressful than it needed to be. But the actual test material can be pretty challenging. You study for quite a long time before taking it.
That's another example when you think about everything that's going on in life and your kids and work, and you always just got to do what you got to do to make it work. So that's awesome. I can see so many people saying breastfeeding is breastfeeding. Why is it that we need to have a specialized career of lactation consultants to help women with breastfeeding?
That's actually funny you say that, because I have a saying that if I do my job well, I hope to not have a job in 20 years.
I love it.
I really think that breastfeeding should be more of a peer-to-peer generational support type of thing. But I think society has really gotten in the way of that. And some cultural norms. Mothers are faced with so many things. Social media and the internet give so many moms advice that aren't necessarily great, which I feel like is what's kind of blossomed this profession. Something that should not require a professional, pretty much. There are some more complex cases that are going to need more guidance, right? But really basic breastfeeding information and support should just be something that our communities provide families. This is a very biological, normal thing, but families don't receive that. We've kind of created more of a need for a professional in the lactation field as we have to kind of fight against social norms and what the misinformation and the lack of education that those have working with moms and babies. You go to your pediatrician or you have a baby and right out of the gate, they give you not very good information and kind of don't set you up for success, then you'll need me down the line. Whereas if right out of the gate, you were well informed on how your body works, what's normal infant behavior, things to expect, things, how to navigate some basic things with our breasts, I'm not needed. And it's kind of funny because it's not that I don't want to work with these families, because that really fills my cup. We've created a need for this profession. I really wish that just breastfeeding was so normal that there wasn't a need. And those, rare, more unique cases with kiddos with more complex issues.
I want to get into learning more about Lady Leche. Working in rural areas, what are some of the barriers that you found that women who needed access to lactation care came across?
What I learned in working in rural areas, there's a lot of families that are sitting out in very remote areas that have access to nothing. And if they do seek help, which can be very hard for a new mother to even reach out for help. But if they were to reach out for help and realize they had to drive an hour and a half one way with a newborn baby who's already screaming because they're new to the world, then they go, well, maybe I'll make do. They're going to just do what they can. They're going to do their own research online, which is great and beneficial. They might seek help virtually, which is, again, a very useful tool. It just kind of wasn't meeting the bar. Being from a rural environment growing up myself, I just kind of could relate to that. And then living in different rural communities around the country, being able to kind of look at it through that lens of, if this was me, if I was plopped down in the middle of some remote area and I didn't have access to a service to help me with the most biologically normal thing of feeding my baby, how would I feel as that mother? You'd feel isolated. That's just not fair. I don't think families should have to go through that. So that's when I looked into how to bring my services to these areas that don't have the funds to have a lactation in their hospital or clinic, or they do have a WIC office, or they should have a WIC office, but maybe that family doesn't qualify for WIC. So how can I kind of bridge that gap? At the time, I was living in southern Colorado, and if you've ever driven past Colorado Springs in Colorado and you've gone down into that area, you'll realize that it's pretty remote. And at the time, of course, as a military family, I'm going, well, I could have an office, but if I have an office space, I'll have to leave it in a year or so, or 2 years. And also, families are still going to have to commute long periods of time, depending on where they're coming from. And so I just kind of started thinking about it. And for a few years, did as much research as I could, and then just kind of ran for it and made a mobile clinic. And it was able to bring services closer to families. I would park it in an area, and then multiple families would come during that day. So it would make it more sustainable versus going to do house visits an hour and a half away from me, one at a time.
What does the mobile clinic look like? When you walk inside, what's the feel?
So it's a DIY, and I don't have any experience building vehicles, but it is an 18-passenger Chevy Express bus. So it's one of those buses that you see at like airport shuttles. So when you walk in, you walk up some steps, and there's like the driving area, and you'll turn left. All but 2 seats were removed. There's 2 seats sitting in the front on the left-hand side for parents to set things. On the right-hand side, I built some shelving units. I have a pump sink. I have an area for my scale. And then on the left-hand side, I have a small assessment table. They're painted green with a butcher block countertop and a custom sink, and it's all cutesy. In the back, there is a sofa that actually can lay down into a sleeper if needed to like work on different laying positions. And then there's a rocking chair, and that's pretty much fills the space. I think there's a little table with a lamp on it. I tried really hard to make it feel comfortable and homey. I was trying my hardest to avoid the sterile look of a medical office, because I'm already asking families to come bring their newborn baby into a bus in the middle of somewhere. The goal was for them to be able to walk in and it feel very relaxing and inviting for them. I did my best.
That's so cool. I love this whole project. What is like a common reaction when women come onto your bus?
Most of them, I think, they're usually pretty impressed with how like pretty it is. Most are like, oh wow, this is really nice. And it's funny because I'm always like, okay, so you're shocked about how nice it is. That means that people had really low expectations. So if you think about making your own mobile unit of some sort, expectations are pretty low.
How do women find out about your services and find out where you're going to be with Lady Leche?
Most of it's word of mouth because I'm outside military bases generally, because that's my husband's military. There's a lot of word of mouth within the military community as well as the surrounding areas. I don't work every day of the week. I'm a mom and in grad school and have a farm. So I'm only working 1 to 2 days clinically. Most moms, when they need lactation services, reach out to me and I have a form that they fill out. I call it their a request for an appointment form, and it just gathers some information. It would gather their information to like create their patient portal if they move forward with an appointment. But it also has an area to say like, is this urgent? Do you need to be seen this week? And then it has options as to where I'll be. And so some of them say, I would love to be seen in this town, or I want to be seen remotely, or I live in this town. So they click that one. And then I just have the conversation with them. Like, I will be there next week. I know you mentioned that this is urgent. These are the other locations I will be. Would one of those work for you? In the meantime, we can get together virtually until I'm in that location. And I just kind of work through them. It is not the most efficient process versus allowing people to just get on and book an appointment. I find it in the long run be pretty efficient for me. With the cost of fuel and things like that, I can't drive an hour away in my bus to see one mom. I need to have a few moms there to make it sustainable. It's my way to be able to maintain my schedule to be efficient, although the booking process is not very efficient.
How about insurance? How does it work with insurance, billing, and your services?
If they're TRICARE, they just contact me and I collect their insurance and I bill directly, because I'm an in-network TRICARE provider. And I actually work with TRICARE families all over. And I do a substantial amount of them remote because they're not in the state of Missouri.
I'm sorry, is TRICARE the state insurance?
TRICARE is military insurance.
Okay.
So that is what active duty, retired, and things like that, they're going to get. The families have TRICARE. So because there's not that many TRICARE lactation consultants, I do work with a lot of families remotely in that population, just from other duty stations. On top of that, I use a service called the Lactation Network, a third-party biller, and they will bill for other major insurance companies that I run into. And so that makes it pretty simple. So I'm only directly billing one company. There are some other companies out there that you can use for third-party billing, but at this point, I kind of add those on depending on the population. And if I see that insurance, then we're going to start trying to figure out how to get that covered. And in the state of Missouri, Medicaid is not covered currently. We're hopefully going to make a little bit of noise and try to get that changed in the next few years. But I do also run a scholarship fund. I do have plenty of moms that reach out to me who don't have insurance, or I don't accept their insurance. And if they aren't able to pay cash pay, so I do just have self-pay rates, then I do have a scholarship fund that I use just based off of donations. I also have like an Etsy shop with fun like boob designs, and the proceeds of that go into that account. And that helps cover appointments for those that can't afford them. I try my hardest to get things covered in some capacity because, again, having a new baby and needing help and reaching out for that help to find out that you can't afford it is just crushing for a lot of families.
Speaking from the perspective of a mom in breastfeeding, it's this innate desire to just want to feed your child with your body and then not being able to. It would be devastating. It's hard. Yeah. It's very hard.
Sure.
Thinking about breastfeeding for our listeners who are currently pregnant and their goal is to exclusively breastfeed, what are some tidbits or advice you would give them to set them on the right path when the baby's born?
I actually recommend starting before your baby's born, and that is not by toughening up your nipples. I remember hearing that and be like, that's just not right. And, in my younger days. So you don't toughen up your nipples. Don't do that.
What are people doing to toughen up their nipples?
Well, in the olden days, I've heard like sandpaper, but I think they were like using rough cloth and they like rub their nipples really hard. I actually don't know anyone who's ever used sandpaper. That was the old story that you had to toughen them up to prepare to breastfeed. And I'm just like, oh no, that's just, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, please don't. But I do recommend starting before baby's born, and that's by taking a prenatal breastfeeding class. Most hospitals should have one, or at least have like some resources. That being said, I know most private practice IBCLCs that I know across the world, we are all intertwined, they usually offer a prenatal class or even an individual appointment. Ideally, if it's covered by insurance and it's no cost to you, then not only are you able to learn kind of what to expect right when your baby's born, and those things that we want moms to really know that's biologically normal for their body and their baby, behaviors their baby will do. So they'll learn that ideally in a prenatal breastfeeding class. But why I really encourage, if you can, have access to some either private practice or a breastfeeding class offered by an IBCLC who also offers outpatient care, is because you're able to establish care with them before baby's born. So if you're 5 days, a week after you've had your baby and things aren't going where they need to be, you've already had formed some type of relationship with an IBCLC and you can call them and try to get in as soon as possible. Usually when I have moms take my prenatal class, and I have moms, again, we're working with military families and beyond. So we have moms from all over the world take my prenatal class, and I always have it affordable. So if you don't have insurance, and that's one thing I tell, a lot of new moms is, if I work with you or if you work with someone else, just call the local IBCLC or the private practice IBCLC and say, I don't have insurance, or this is my budget. Is there a way for me to take a prenatal class? On your website, it's stated to be this price. Do you have anything available for me to get this information? Most of us want moms to get this information. We have to keep our practice afloat. But if there's a way to get that information to the mom in a cost-effective way, most of us are willing to make that happen. That's how I run my prenatal class. I have a price on my website, but if a mom can't afford that, we're going to figure a way for her to zoom in and be able to observe and get that information as well. What I tell most moms is, and I'm assuming most IBCLCs in private practice are going to work this way, once you've taken my prenatal class, you're in my system as a patient or a client. Now, moving forward, when you contact me, I already have your information. And so it's a lot quicker to get you into an appointment. I have them tell me their due date. I'm usually tracking, not like, I know this mom's going to deliver at this date. Like that's, I don't have that much space in my brain. I've, communicated with them like, hey, when you have your baby, just send me a quick message, or have your partner or have someone in the first few days of having your baby. So I have you on my radar. So that way, if I need to squeeze you in last minute, I can. We're all kind of on the same page that you've had your baby. If I don't hear from you and everything's going great, then I'm rooting for you from the other side, and that's what's going to happen. But if you call me and I knew 2 days prior you had your baby, then I'm already going, okay, now I can pull your chart. I can read your medical history. I can see what's going on. And I can talk you through what needs to be done immediately and then get you in as soon as possible. So I really encourage anyone pregnant, even if it's not your first baby, establish care with an IBCLC and take a prenatal class, ideally with an IBCLC who offers one-on-one appointments, outpatient type appointments, or in private practice, because I think that's where we're going to get the ball rolling. I also think that just by taking the prenatal class or taking a prenatal breastfeeding class, these moms are able to kind of better understand what to expect with their body and what's biologically normal. They, run to the internet and or they run to someone who doesn't have the best answer for them. And then that kind of creates a cascade of events that don't set them up for success.
I agree with you 100%. I love how you mentioned get connected with IBCLC while you're pregnant, because speaking from the lens of a labor and delivery nurse, if you deliver in a hospital and the hospital says we have lactation support, we have IBCLC. When staffing is down, the first nurses that are pulled to help on the floor are the lactation specialists. So even if a hospital is promoting, marketing, all this support they have for breastfeeding mom, they get pulled all the time. So many patients are left without support in the hospital.
That's a question most moms have. Oh, my hospital has lactation. I was lactation in a hospital. And when I tell you a small little labor and delivery, amazing facility, but there was 8 rooms. And there was 2 of us, not every day, but 2 of us, because it was me and one of my mentors working on that floor doing outpatient as well as bedside. But the problem was, even with that, there was moms who got discharged without seeing us. And I'm like, okay, so that's 8 beds.
Yeah.
And 2 of us. Now let's put 1 IBCLC and 20 beds. We're human. We can only see so many moms, and we can walk into a room, or we can have an outpatient appointment where this mom needs 30 minutes of help. And it's just beautiful. Everything's going great. She needed reassurance. She needed a cheerleader. I pulled that. I did great. We all did great. We moved on. And there's moms who need 2+ hours. Well, if I'm working with a mom for 2.5 hours and someone's about to be discharged, if you're in a hospital setting, right? That's not where I'm at right now. How am I going to get to them? And then they go home, and they were campaigning on the fact that they were going to get lactation help in the hospital, and they didn't get it. And then they get sent on their way, and they don't know where their resources are, because there usually are resources, even if those resources are only virtual with the private practice IBCLC or a company that offers virtual services. We have so much going on in our heads when we have a new baby. Finding help is not as easy as I think people think, especially in those early postpartum days. I am a big advocate for, if I talk to someone in a hospital, have a resource list and do what you can to get every single resource on there for these families and keep it updated, because they need to be able to go home and be like, there was a pink flyer in there that had lactation support, and it should include what's available at the hospital and out in the community and what's virtual, and allow these families to be able to access something, because no one needs to be sitting there on day 3 with sore breasts and not knowing how to feed their baby and needing help and not able to get the help. And I think what's I have found to be the most interesting little tidbit of information with the families I worked with and all over the world is the number of moms that come to see me. They're on like baby 4, baby 5, even baby 6 and baby 7. And they go, I've breastfed all my kids. Why did this go sideways? And so I always say, even if not on your first baby, if you're in a new community and you don't have some kind of relationship with lactation, take a prenatal class, establish some kind of relationship, because even those baby number 7s will give you a run for your money. Because every breastfeeding journey is different, right? Every baby is going to be different. And so I love my prenatal class when I have a mom that has multiple children, and they tell that to these new moms. And then they say, oh, I breastfed all 5 of my kids, but I'm here because my 6th baby was really challenging. And it's kind of one of those things that those new moms go, oh, so even she doesn't really have it. You know what I mean? Even she needs help. So me needing help as a first-time mom is pretty normal. So I think that's kind of fun to have that kind of environment in a group class.
Yeah, for sure. I can see how that would resonate and make someone who had their first baby feel a little bit better about the breastfeeding journey.
Yeah, for sure.
So I saw recently that you spoke at the National WIC Association Breastfeeding Conference, and you were speaking on a topic called latch emotion. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Over the past 2 years or so, a little over 2 years, I have started working on, and I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And I say that because there's a lot of people that I talk to in other parts of the world. You go, well, yeah, we're doing most of that stuff with our babies anyways. But in Western societies, we're not doing a lot of infant movements and moving our babies. And we have a lot of babies that lay on their backs and all these, great devices that were developed for us. And I learned that there are some babies that come to me with feeding problems, and they really are just a baby that needs the opportunity to move. And so I started collaborating with body workers and different people to try to figure out, as someone who helps families feed babies, how do I bridge that gap? Because again, we're working in rural communities, right? So in a perfect world, I'm going to refer them to a body worker and I'm going to just say, see ya when your baby isn't all tight and uncomfy, and then kind of work on the feeding problem. But not everyone that I work with, most of them, if they've drove an hour and a half to see me, having them drive another hour to see a professional body worker, it might not be in the cards. So I've worked on ways to just, through play and different sensory play type of things, to create a class and workshop that talks lactation professionals and perinatal professionals how to just kind of have those conversations with families and how to incorporate play and movement with their baby and target different areas of the body that might be tense, to help those kiddos feed a little bit better. The goal isn't to replace any kind of professional body work whatsoever, but it's to get those kiddos moving. So at the WIC conference, I did a hour-long talk that talked on just kind of what happens in our culture in the United States that makes kiddos more stationary and how that can impact feeding, and then talked about the 3 main things that I incorporate into my practice that I teach parents to help them move their babies more. And then that feeds into my workshop that is 6 hours long that puts those skills in our hands, right? It's walking through each individual skill, teaching those to those professionals so that they can then go and teach their families that they work with to get those kiddos moving. So that official workshop actually launches in January. I've been doing some pilots. So I've been having small groups kind of go through this training and getting their feedback. So by January, the goal is to have that all perfected and available. And then that workshop it does have some LSERPs with it, so you get extended education with it. And the goal will be to offer it both virtually, which wouldn't be ideal because I like in person, but it will be available virtually as well as in person. And so if there is somebody who has at least 20 people who want to take the course, then I can fly out there and teach it for the day. And we do all the hands-on stuff and get those people well aware of how to get kiddos safely moving. It's a lot of play, and the way I teach it is that the person, if it's the lactation consultant, the nurse, the CLC, the doula, whoever it may be, that's teaching these movement through play and sensory play and things like that, it's really geared to be taught using a doll. So that way it gives the family the autonomy to move their own baby versus feeling like they need the professional to move their baby, because we really need that repetition. We really need these kiddos moving every day. And so we need to give those skills to the family to be able to do that. So that is what I'm currently getting up and going. And I'm really excited because all the people who have already taken the course through the pilot process have all texted me, oh my gosh, I did this, a little exercise or little movement I taught. And they go, this baby finally gaped and fed well. And oh my gosh. And a lot of people are drawn to that course who are in more rural areas that don't have a lot of access to things.
I'm curious about the motion. Do we start moving the babies right as newborns when they're born? Are there different steps to it? Do you start when they're a little bit older? How does that work? I'm curious from my own practice.
It's different. So I teach a wide range. Some are a little bit more, there's more movement to it. And we go through this, right? So one thing that I teach is, I call it the fold and dip. And it's where we take baby and we essentially sit them on the top of our breasts, on our chest area. And we sit them and we kind of fold them into themselves to stretch the whole body. And then I don't have a camera to show you. Then we hold the torso and we bend down and we dip and we kind of do this little head hang, and the baby loves it. Well, you're not going to do this on a 1-day-old baby with 0 head control and just let their head do their thing, right? You're going to need to guide them, or you're going to wait till this baby's older. The movements are all, we go over variations of each one, when it's appropriate to do it, when it's not appropriate to do it. But the course goes over more than that. It goes over safe baby wearing, which we can start with newborn babies if we do it safely and correctly. We go over sensory play. You can start sensory play as a newborn. Some of the movements you can do with newborn. I also go over cultural norms and kind of like these professional recommendations around swaddling and tummy time and the use of containers, to really giving these professionals the tools to be able to have conversations with families instead of swaddling all day long. How can we just give the baby the opportunity to move? That might be, don't use the snoo every minute you put your baby down. Maybe that's baby wearing instead of putting our baby in the snoo in a swaddle. Maybe that is teaching them safe baby wearing so they can attend to their toddler instead of having to rely on something that keeps them in a tight, confined space for long periods of time. Or teaching them these are conveniences. These are things that families need, right? We can't eliminate them in every situation depending on the family and what's going on. And they're going to need these things. But how can we kind of counteract that time spent in these more confined spaces? What tools can we give them? Maybe that's teaching them some more sensory play where they're putting their baby on their side or their tummy, and you can side lie a baby and put them on their tummy from birth. And how can we teach them to do that in a way that the baby enjoys it and it's fun for the family or fun for the other children to engage with this kiddo? It's really geared towards giving so many tools in the toolbox and then letting those families discover the fun and the benefits of getting their kiddo moving and engaging with them and getting kiddos out of their little confinement. It does definitely impact the way of feeding. And it's funny because I've seen kiddos come to me who they might even be exclusively bottle fed, but they aren't feeding well. Like they're really tight and tense and they just don't feed well. And there might be other underlying reasons well beyond this concept that they're not able to feed well. Even non-breastfed babies, when I start teaching families fun ways to move their babies, get them linked up with an infant massage instructor or, all these little things, then they go, oh, wow, they're feeding even just at the bottle better. And I see it a lot with breastfed kiddos. Most of us, you and me both, we can feel in our body when we're tight and tense because we sat too long or we took a plane ride and our neck's sore or we slept weird. And I always explain to parents, if you woke up with a sore neck, you would know what to do to try to stretch it out or move it. Babies don't have that. They just have to compensate. And so if that tension in their body is simply just because they laid a certain way or their arms were swaddled a certain way, and all we need to do is just help them move a little bit, and that makes that tension in that area that is causing discomfort improve, then they are able to feed a little bit better. It's just really fascinating because I like to keep it playful and fun, and people that take the course seem to really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And when you think about the common idea of what breastfeeding is and whether someone is successful or not, I think so much in the medical community plays it's like black and white. If it works, try it. If it doesn't work, you just get the bottle, as opposed to all these different avenues to really try and make it work. You creating this course and all these different ways to help a mom to achieve her goal, which is exclusively breastfeeding. I think this is awesome.
It's one of those things that families really enjoy learning how to do these things. Because like I said, I'm not reinventing the wheel at all. Ever since human existence, there's been some interaction with your baby, moving your babies. But in the past 50 to 100 years, so many things have came about on the market that kind of are trying to replace some of these things that we should be doing with our baby. It's not anything new. It's just saying, hey, yeah, we have all these great things that we have to our disposal. This is great, but we can't keep a baby in rock and place were recalled, but something similar like that for every time that they're not eating because they're not given the opportunity to move. 100 years ago, they probably would put the baby in the bassinet, but the baby probably also was put on the floor and they were wearing the babies a lot more because we're carrying mammals. And so there's a lot of things, or you had more people in the home that could help with the baby. So you didn't have to rely on putting that baby in a lounger for the 3 hours that you have to fold laundry and get the other kids ready for all the things. I think it's just a shift in our culture but no one is helping our families as these generations go on and on. No one's helping them say, like, hey, this is what we actually should be doing with our babies. This is optimal. And so giving those skills to those that are on the front lines of working with these moms and babies, we're able to drop those seeds when they have these new babies. Then we might see less plagiocephaly at 6 months or things like that. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm not at all. This has been around forever. It's just putting it in a context that people can take it and utilize it and help those families in their communities.
We're coming close to the end of the episode, and I want to end on an empowering note. One common thing that I see in my practice that genuinely breaks my heart, so many of my patients say that they don't believe that their body has the ability to feed their baby, whether they are not going to create enough milk, that their nipples are not appropriate, that their breasts are too large. So many women, before they even begin, doubt their body's ability to feed their baby. What advice would you give to these women to change that mentality?
Circling back to prenatal education, simply because that would prepare them for realistic things that are going to happen. A lot of us, they're not aware of how often their baby should be stooling, or what stools should look like, or what will your breast possibly feel like? How do we counteract that? How much milk does a baby need? Because a lot of these families, if they've never been around a breastfed baby, frequent feeding, right? That's biologically normal. But if they've only been around formula-fed kiddos that maybe weren't feeding as frequently, then they might think something's wrong. I have moms that come to me with these huge lists of concerns, like, well, what happens if this happens? And what happens if my baby gets this? And all these things. And I always say, okay, this is the deal. I'm going to be here and I'm going to help you figure out that problem if we get there. If not, you're going to enjoy your baby. You're going to rock this breastfeeding thing and you are going to do awesome. But you know that you have someone in your corner that if you have a question, hey, my baby did this today, is this normal? You have someone in your corner to help you navigate that. And I think just that simple confidence of having someone in their corner makes a huge difference. And I have so many families come to me, and not just me. I know IBCLCs all across the world, and we all do very similar things. And we all have these same conversations. Oh, I had this mom, and this is our third baby. She couldn't breastfeed her others. They all stopped at 3 weeks. And she's now at almost to a year. And she keeps telling me she couldn't do it without me. And she goes, we always laugh, like, she's never really had that big of a problem. Simply me being there as support has helped her get to that point. She's able to get to her goal. And it's one of those things that we have to remind ourselves that support goes so far. And that's why I say, I hope one day I don't have a job. I hope every mom just has so many people in their corner supporting them and letting them do what is biologically normal and not giving crummy advice, that my job doesn't have a place anymore, or it's very minimal. I'm going to have to take on I'm going to have to start making sourdough to pay my bills because moms don't need me as often as they do now. Like, that's my goal, because if we normalize normal breast things and we normalize normal infant behaviors and we normalize how often an infant should eat and what that should look like, and we start normalizing these things, then people then start receiving good advice from those around them and they feel supported. And I think support's a big one. And being able to have access to someone who gives evidence-based advice, making sure that you have someone in your corner that you can contact. That might be simply a friend who has breastfed multiple children and has given peer support. And that might be what you need. It might be an IBCLC that has advanced skills on wild things, and everyone's where they land on that spectrum of the help they need will vary. But definitely, I think just simply having someone in your corner to help you answer those questions, because you get them at 3 a.m. My baby did this. Is this normal? And simply being able to have that consistent face to help you through something. You can ask those uncomfortable questions. You're not feeling judged. I'm a mom too. And I tell moms all the time, I got dressed today, when they come in for appointments, I got dressed today, but I'm a hot mess 90% of the time. I'm a mom. I'm going through all the things too. This is my education. This is my background. This is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm going to give you the best help that I can give you. But I'm just like you. You can ask me the uncomfortable questions, and we're going to get through them. I think it really comes down to just support and access to the help when you need it.
This was amazing. Everything that you're doing, from one woman to another, a mother to another mother, a maternal healthcare provider to another maternal healthcare provider, your work is so needed and you are making waves. You're helping women. And thank you so much for what you're doing.
So thank you for having me. It was fun.
Please follow us on our social media platforms at maternal_wealth on Instagram and Maternal Wealth on Facebook. Visit our website at www.maternalwealth.com to sign up as a maternal wealth provider or search for maternal wealth providers near you. Lastly, check out our birth course, where I discuss how hospital staffing, policies, and access to medication can affect your birth experience and outcome. Stay strong, stay empowered, and remember, you got this.